Sirhan is tackled by a number of people, including George Plimpton, speaking of the CIA.
Yeah, speaking of the CIA. Although it's interesting because George Plimpton gave some of the best evidence that Sirhan was in a state of hypnosis. So here's where it gets really crazy. So again, why would Sirhan agree to fire blanks as part of a plot? And if he was conscious of the plot, he would be the distractor in the magic act pulling focus so the other shooters could get in. And this, by the way, happened in a plot against Jimmy Carter. The police literally caught a guy firing blanks, but they were able to shut it down before the plot took off. So it was like a dry run they were doing. All right. But Plimpton talked about, he's like, I can't tell you what he looked like, but I can tell you about his eyes. They were enormously calm and peaceful. And interestingly enough, dilated pupils is one of the signs of hypnosis you cannot fake. And so if people are trying to determine who's hypnotized or not, that's one of the things they look for is, are their pupils dilated? Because you can't just do that to yourself. It only happens when you're in this relaxed state.
Or on LSD.
Yeah. And in my book, I talk about the Kim Jong-nam assassination, which was the half-brother of Kim Jong-un of North Korea. And by the way, Kim Jong-nam would have been next in succession. So kind of an important guy. Two women show up at the airport. They're given a bottle of water and a towel. One is to spray people. The other is to wipe them off. And this is all filmed for television and always is fun. Except when Kim Jong-nam comes out, the towel they wipe him with has a VX nerve agent on it. And he dies a few hours later. So then the question is, how guilty are the women? Did they know they were participating in an assassination plot? Was it kind of accidental homicide? I mean, how would you charge that? And my argument with Sirhan is that he was hypnotized to fire in the pantry, but not at Robert Kennedy. He was firing at what he thought were targets. And again, this sounds crazy and, I'm making up excuses and he's lying. But Dan Brown, who's one of the hypnosis experts in the country right now, written textbooks, used at many universities, testified in court. He got 60 hours with Sirhan. And Sirhan had been hypnotized by his original defense team, but in a horrible way. Sirhan, reach for your gun. There's Kennedy. Sirhan, reach for your gun and shoot him. Do you remember that, Sirhan? It's like, trying to lead the witness. And of course, Sirhan couldn't remember because that was not in his brain. But when under open-ended questions, what do you see? What do you hear? Who are you with? What's going on? Sirhan remembered being with a girl on the trace stacker. He'd followed her in there because she had an unspoken availability. He was turned on by her.
He said, and I quote, I thought I was going to hook up with her.
Yeah. He thought he was going to get lucky that night. And
Fair enough.
He's following this girl around like a puppy dog. She gets him on the trace stacker, and he remembers seeing a door open. And he only remembers this under hypnosis because outside of hypnosis, he says he has no memory. And in my book, I have a lot of things he can't remember. He can't remember if he's married or not. He can't remember what car he drove. He can't even remember if they've given him his Miranda rights, even though they read it to him 3 times. And he doesn't remember Bill Jordan's name, even though he had just given it to him. Some drugs, and I've been under anesthesia. I don't know if you ever have, but that was my experience coming out of anesthesia. I remember asking the same question, is it over? Is it over? And no matter how they answered me, it didn't stick in my brain. It was the most frustrating thing. I literally couldn't remember like a word later what they had just said. And I just remember asking, is it over? Is it over? And they must have, they must hate that because I guess they get that a lot. But there are drugs that will make you forget short-term memory. And I really think Sirhan was drugged. And I make that argument in my book. But anyway, so when Kennedy walks in, the girl moves him to the center of the room and pinches his back a certain way. And suddenly he thinks he's back at the target range where he'd been all day. And he sees the big targets in front of him and pulls out his gun and is firing. And again, that sounds so convenient. It sounds like a lie, right? Except that I went to a hypnosis show. I went to a whole bunch of hypnosis shows, but this one I'll never forget because during the show, the woman had been hypnotized to believe she'd gotten a $35,000 check. It was just play money, right?
That's
but she's
so
like,
mean.
oh,
You should be
blah,
like,
blah, blah.
it's for $50 or something.
I know, really, $35,000. She was really excited. And I had talked to her for like 20 minutes before the show. Perfectly normal, perfectly nice, perfectly intelligent, not some weirdo, not somebody with brain impairment, just very normal.
Yeah.
And so during the show, I see this. And then after the show, I actually went to look for the hypnotist because I wanted to ask him about Sirhan. And he kind of got freaked out and literally like ran out of the area. I mean, it was like, he did not want to talk about that. Too young to have been involved. There's no way he was involved. But as the crowds were clearing, I noticed this woman still there looking incredibly distressed. And I went up to her and I'm like, are you okay? Did you lose your family? And she goes, well, I have to give this back.
No.
I'm like, oh, it's just play money. I don't think he cares. And she said, no, it's a $25,000 check. And I'm like, oh my God, she literally cannot see what's in her hand. She is in the grip of a hypnotic illusion. And I tried to shake her out of it. I'm like, can I hold it with you? Hey, let's bring it closer. Look in the upper right. Do you see where it says 100? And she cut me off. She says, no, it's a $35,000 check or whatever it was, 25, 35. I was freaked out at that point because I'd never seen that before. I'd never seen somebody completely convinced of a reality that wasn't there. And so after that, I knew that Sirhan must have seen something else in the pantry. And it wasn't till I got to Dan Brown's testimony, that, his write-up for the courts of what he had seen with Sirhan. Then I actually believed Sirhan. He thought he was firing at targets. He did not plan to kill Kennedy. He did not want to kill Kennedy. He said in the court in the original trial, I loved Kennedy. I don't know why I would have wanted to kill him. And so his defense, and I use that term generously, his defense team, with air quotes, told him it would be better if he said like he did it for Israel or something. So they helped him craft this narrative. I mean, not for Israel.
My defense
for
team has told me that a bunch of times. Yeah.
He's a Palestinian, and so they said, it'd be better, if we frame this as something, that's political, and then the jury will believe you. But the thing is, it wasn't. And his brother Munir said, Lisa, Sirhan's politics have been blown way out of proportion. We didn't talk about that much. We didn't argue about it that much. And of course, that became then the big cover story. Well, Sirhan is a aggrieved Palestinian. In fact, one of the books on my shelf is like the first, the forgotten terrorist.
Well, that's what I had always heard, because being like sort of like somewhat aware of this assassination, just growing up, it was like, well, this guy shot RFK because of RFK's support for Israel and I think sale of like 50 bombers or bomber jets to Israel at some point. But it definitely does not seem like that. I mean, even in the like him getting questioned by the police. He has, like you were saying, he's very confused, doesn't remember, like have any short-term memory.
He's so confused that the DA who comes into the room says he's trying to talk to him, and he finally like stops and he changes the subject and goes, do you know where you are? Do you know why you're here? You've been charged. And Sirhan kind of mumbles and he's like, we're in jail, and he's like, do you understand what I've said? And Sirhan's like, so long as you say it. I mean, the DA's assistant, Howard, knew there was a problem. He could tell that Sirhan was in an altered state even after the assassination. And like I said, they're trying to find out his name. And at one point they come in and they call him Jesse, and they think his name's Jesse because one of the other suspects who was captured but released evidently was named Jesse Greer. And so they thought, now we know, because they didn't know Sirhan's name. He had no ID on him. And Munir said, at least we all left our wallets in the car. That's what you did in those days. They just left him in the glove compartment, so he didn't have any ID on him. And it's just an incredible story, which is why I wrote a book. I can't explain it in 45 minutes or an hour or even 5 hours. It's 25 hours on audiobook. It's a lot of information.
Why I do want to pause and go back to the hypnosis stuff, because I think that maybe to, some people either who, I don't know, maybe haven't listened to our podcast for that long, or maybe are new to this story, that might sound so out of left field, like you're saying, like this is just something that, you make up on the stand. This is something you grab for, last ditch effort kind of defense or whatever. But you say that, the hypnotist you saw was too young for him to have been involved in doing it to Sirhan. But the U.S. government has been involved in that kind of stuff for quite some time.
50s,
and
yes.
Yes. And, we have, offhandedly sometimes we make reference to MK Ultra and similar programs to that. But for our listeners who aren't familiar, can you explain a little bit some of that?
Yes, I will. So one of the things that happened during the Korean War is our Korean soldiers were captured and confessed to war crimes. And they talked about that they said we'd sent biological warfare into Korea. Well, guess what? I met a guy who was forced to join the CIA when he learned that we were sending biological weapons into Korea. So it was actually a true story. But the cover story was that, well, they were hypnotized and programmed to say that, and that they were all given show trials. And so then Alan Dulles, being the psychotic genius that he was at the CIA at the time, he went to Congress and said, "Oh my God, they're brainwashing our soldiers. We need to investigate hypnosis and find ways to get the same kind of information from our POWs that we've captured and to prevent them from being hypnotizable. But we need lots of money to experiment." And the Navy did its own separate experiments, and the Army has done its own experiments. I mean, every branch has done experiments, but in the 50s, the CIA did a lot of them. And one of them was almost identical to what happened in the pantry. It was called Project Artichoke, and they posed it initially as a question in their documents. Can a man of redacted nationality be made to commit an act of attempted assassination as part of a larger operation? So it's like, can we hypnotize somebody to stand and fire blanks so that other shooters can get in and do the job? And the answer clearly, sadly, is yes. And that's the other thing I found, that I've been, every time I go to a hypnosis show, you always hear the same thing. Oh, we can never make somebody do something against their will. That's true and a lie at the same time, because you can. You just can't do it overtly. I can't tell you, go kill your mother. You're not going to do it. But if I say, a spy has captured your family, and a woman who's going to look exactly like your mother, who's been trained to cry and laugh and talk to you and knows your whole family history, is going to come in here and kill you if you don't kill her first. And you'll never get your real mother back unless you kill this spy. In hypnosis, somebody might kill their own mother with that kind of a setup, because you've now changed the reality. And so with Sirhan, it's much simpler than that. They just change the reality, make him think he's back at the firing range. That would be an easy thing to program somebody to do. His lawyers called it range mode,
Have you ever seen that Darren Brown special where he programs the person? I went to one of his shows once. And
Darren Brown is a genius and a light worker, because Darren Brown's whole shtick is kind of helping you see how the trick is done, so that you are better protected from that sort of thing. I have the greatest respect for Darren Brown. And
he did guess the PIN number of the person I went with. And,
did he really? Oh my God, that's
which
so
was
freaky.
Very weird. And then my name, which was, it was strange.
Oh my gosh. He's quite skilled. But did you know the Discovery Channel did a replica of the Darren Brown experiment and got the exact same result? I
did not know that.
Yes. This is a much lesser known show, and it's not on the internet. But I found it and I watched it. And they got a guy and they set it up so the guy thought whatever he was participating was over, and he was to carry a gun, and they made very clear it was loaded, and he got to the bottom of the stairs and the hypnotic signal was given, and he fired, and the person showed down dead. Now, unlike in the Darren Brown show, where the guy was kind of he didn't have a big reaction to seeing himself shoot. Famous comedian on stage.
It was Christopher Hitchens, right? So
yeah. But yeah, it wasn't, but that's funny.
Well,
but it's all right. No, that would have been funnier, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Anyway, but in this other show, the guy was literally so freaked out when he saw on video himself shooting. He's like, please tell me he's still alive. He was just like, oh my God, I can't believe I shot somebody.
Mhm.
And of course, they bring the guy in because it was an actor. It was all staged. And then he started to relax a little bit. But he was as freaked out as you can imagine that Sirhan must have felt. Like, I killed somebody? How could I not know I killed somebody? What the heck happened? His first words to his mother, Munir told me this the other day, she's like, what happened? Sirhan's like, I can't remember. And can you imagine now? So every time he goes to parole, he has to confess to a crime he doesn't remember committing. And he has to apologize to the Kennedy family for a crime he doesn't remember committing and doesn't have any sense that he did commit. And the parole board won't free him unless he shows appropriate remorse.
Yeah.
So it's like he's in a catch-22. And so he's pretty much said over the years whatever his lawyers have told him to say, because he literally does not remember. But he does feel genuine grief for the Kennedy family because he actually liked Robert Kennedy. He was an immigrant, and Kennedy talked about immigrants and the brown people and the black people. And Sirhan, as a minority, he really admired what Kennedy was doing. And so to me, the saddest blow of all comes now with some of the Kennedy children, not all of them. Robert Kennedy had 11 children. 2 of them are now dead. 6 of them.
I know. Liz's eyes opened up. I know.
Yeah.
Every time
I
I
did
read
not
that,
realize
it's like,
he had
Jesus
that many
Christ,
kids.
bro, he was
People don't. He was
42. It's like
Catholic. They don't believe in birth
Who
control.
knew you could be more of a Wilt Chamberlain?
I
in
mean,
the
my
Kennedys?
God. Yeah.
You rival
Jesus.
Jack. I guess
Whenever-
that's why Bobby and Jack always said that rivalry was.
Yeah. I mean,
Well, when
11
people say
kids.
that, like, they try and make up stories about Bobby having affairs, it's like, no. That guy really
Hey, he's
loved
just a
his
good
wife.
Catholic boy.
He really loved his wife.
Those Catholic boys are always popping out those kids.
Yeah.
I will say a detail from your book that I had no idea. I mean, there's a lot of details I didn't know about, but one of the details that really stuck out to me was that, and if I'm getting this wrong, please correct me, but
Sure.
Bobby slept at John Frankheimer's house the
Yes.
night before. And that, of course, is the director of the original, obviously not the later, very bad
Yes,
Manchurian
but the
Candidate.
original wonderful film. Yeah, the
Incredible
Manchurian
movie.
Candidate.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
a consultant to that film
Mhm.
said on the radio right after the assassination that
Oh,
he
yes.
suspected Sirhan had been hypnotized. And the thing is, a lot of us suspected he was the hypnotist, and that was the closest to a brag he could do because he was a
Well,
big
later,
braggart.
didn't that hypnotist get in a little bit of trouble later too?
Oh yeah. So here's the guy saying you can't hypnotize people, do something against his will, and then these women sued him for having sex while they were under hypnosis.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
yes.
he suddenly, kind of just disappeared from the public scene after.
He's like, actually, I misspoke. I said you can. You can. It's.
Yeah. And that, unfortunately, that didn't just happen then. That is still happening. I quoted some cases from like the 1990s. Like a woman went into the pharmacy and then came home and felt weird. It's like something strange has happened. She figured out the pharmacist had hypnotized her and had sex with her. It's just, people don't have any idea how powerful hypnosis is. And I encourage you to go to shows, but I encourage you go up and try and listen to the people after the show is over. Because it wasn't just this woman. This woman, it was the first time I saw an illusion, but I had seen another guy completely denying he'd done all the things we'd just seen him do on stage. And he's like, oh, I was just fooling around. And he's like, I didn't mean any of that. And then his friend said, well,
Sounds
you
like
just
me.
did this. He's like, no, I didn't. I'm like, oh my God, he doesn't know what he did.
Well, what's crazy to me is like people will see that stuff and be like, oh my God, that's so crazy, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, imagine that now with the full funding and fully like backed research of the US military for half a century.
Exactly. That's it, half a century. And in my book, I lay out several documents that show they had operational successes with this. All right. They were they always put it in couch terms because they can't say, yeah, we were able to program somebody to kill somebody. You can't say that because that's a crime. That's murder. But they all but say that. They all but say that. They stop right short of that line, but it's very clear that that's what has happened. And this is something that probably is continuing to this day under different names. When Watergate happened, Richard Nixon went to the CIA and said, you got to cover for me. CIA refused. And so Nixon fired Richard Helms. Richard Helms then went and had all the MK Ultra and Project Artichoke and all the mind control files burned. And it's like, you wouldn't do that unless you had something serious to hide, right? If they'd never had any success, there's literally no reason to burn those files. The only reason to burn them is because you've had some major successes you don't ever want to surface.
They're failures too. I mean, there's that one that woman in Canada. I mean, there's some very prominent
Candy Jones.
I guess I would say proven victims of. I mean, obviously there's probably many more that are unproven, but people have come out.
There are a few that have won like $1 million lawsuits against the CIA in Canada because the McGill Institute up there was being funded by the CIA, and they were doing these horrific psychic driving experiences where they were literally trying to wipe people's minds completely.
They turned that one woman into a vegetable.
I mean, these are people who, by the way, cut off monkey heads and sewed them on each other's body and tried to bring them back to life. I mean, this is how crazy these people are. They will stop at nothing because if you can do it to monkeys, how cool would it be to give your favorite spy a new body when his old body gets shot up? I mean, they literally were doing these kinds of things. These are sick people, doing very sick experiments. And it is not at all beyond the realm that they set Sirhan up in this plot.